Okay, welcome back to another episode of Being Extraordinary. I have a guest with me today that I'm very excited for her to share her story with you because I've been able to bear witness to your evolution because we've been connected for a while and I'm just watching it happen and I'm like, what a journey. So I can't wait to talk about it. Today I have Cassandra DeAnn with me on the podcast. And I'll let you tell your story. But the reason I reached out to you to invite you to the podcast is because you have this background that comes from a fairly strict religious upbringing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And lately, I've seen you come into almost like this divine, feminine, sensual rising. And I'm like, wow, that is a 180. So I would love for you to share with us kind of like where you came from and where you're at now. And we'll just vibe with
Oh,
it.
I love it. Oh my gosh. Yes. Where do I start? Right. Yes, to your point, I did grow up in a very religiously abusive home. I had a spontaneous awakening about 3.5 years ago that I wasn't really expecting at all. You were my very first Akashic Records reading, which was like
Remember that.
it's been you've literally that reading has helped unfold everything, all the steps of my journey. It's just been so
I love that.
entertaining. Yeah, it's incredible. So yeah, it was a little challenging growing up. I moved out when I was 18 years old. I wasn't entertaining any of this stuff. So, my awakening was completely unexpected. Altogether. I spent the time, kind of like when something magical happens to you like that, you're kind of like, okay, I'm pretty logical, but I can't explain what the hell that just was. So I kind of was like, I'm an Aries. So I'm like, I'm all in. I'm like, all right, I'll sign up for the crazy train. Let's see where this goes. No clue what I'm doing. And so what happened was I ended up having, this long beautiful healing journey where I found myself. I went from like wanting to be a wallflower and just like really coming out. And honestly, I thought like I was good. I was like, yep, I've checked all my boxes. Like life is good. I focused a lot on where I wanted my career to go and how I wanted to help people. And then it all just came crashing down this past April, which I know everybody was talking about what a big deal that eclipse was, being in the US. Yeah, I don't know, but it was on my sun sign. Like, literally
Mhm.
took place. My birthday was right before it. And so what happened was it was this crazy unfolding where first I ended up having this experience, which we can skim over right now. But basically, it was this very mystical experience in which I uncovered like a past life where I was actually like a tantric yogani. And it was not, it did not make my body happy. Like I was really, really upset by these visuals and realizations. And as I left where I lived at the time to go back into the house, there was a huge black snake on my porch. Like I could count on one hand how
Really?
many times I've seen a snake, right? Well, days later, I ended up finally feeling okay and open to talk about what happened, which ultimately what happened was this intense sexual awakening and realizing that how much my religious conditioning growing up was still affecting me despite the years of healing and evolving. Like I still had convinced myself, oh, and this is so hard. I had convinced myself I was basically shutting down any sort of vitality aspect of myself.
Mm.
I didn't even realize it. Like I wasn't listening to music because what is that? Like that's feeling and expression. I wasn't happy in how I was connecting with my partner at the time. So I said, you know what? As long as I do the healing and the work myself, I don't need that. Like, I don't need to have that
Mhm.
intimacy, that connection. I'm just going to be like this self sufficient badass. And so, like, I fixated on my career. And I was always like agitated, like I needed to do more. I wasn't going fast enough or hard enough and pushing myself. And I realized that I came to this point where I was like, this is out of balance. Like this is, the universe was saying, mm-mm, Cassandra, this isn't the way to go. And I realized that there was a lot in life I did want to experience. Well, as I was sharing a lot of the intricate details of my sexuality that was repressed with my partner at the time, that black snake shed its skin on my porch. It came back, didn't see it after that. Didn't see, I didn't see it after that. It shed
My
its skin. Like,
goodness.
talk about some black, dark goddess energy here,
Wow.
feminine power. It
And
was
you're talking about a literal black snake.
a little, and it was big.
What?
I had a friend come by because I left it there. And she's like, Cassandra, you realize this is a big, mature snake. I was like, oh, I know. It was huge. And she's like, can I have it? I was like, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do
No,
with
I'm not
this
keeping it.
snake skin. What am I going to do with it? Boy, I had no clue because 2 days later, astrology wise, I don't remember what it was, but it was one of those Kazimi things that they were like, oh my gosh, this is a huge ordeal. And it was then I found myself really drawn to understand non dualistic Tantra, and that being a core essence of this experience. And in that moment, like a switch went off. I knew my marriage of 20 plus years was over,
Mhm.
which was hard. It took like a week of I like just processing, wishing to hope up that I woke up and the feeling went away, and it
Mhm.
it didn't. It just oh, it was probably one of the hardest things to go through, and especially because I realized how conditioned I was to feel like the good person looks like this. You go through this
Mhm.
path, because really to the outsider it doesn't make sense. But I knew that divine intervention was sending me a different direction. So I'm going to take a breath there because there's so much more I
Yes.
could say. And I'm a talker, but that's yeah. Oh.
The journey so far, Cole's notes of the intense transformation you've been going through. So I have so many questions, but where to start would be, so when did you like meet your husband? Was this when you were still in your religious, is he come from a religious background as well?
So that is a great question. So yeah, I actually was not allowed dating. So I snuck around. And that is how I was still living at home, and I snuck around. And the sad thing about it is this is I because it was a very dysfunctional home, I had to be strong for my parents because they were very emotionally unstable. I had to feel I felt like I constantly had to be put together, which has really been unwinding, and this journey of coming into and feeling safe
Mm.
in my feminine expression, which has been really hard. So yeah, I met him and I was kind of like, I went from one dysfunctional scenario where they were like, okay, this is what you need to be, when you consider religiously and parental expectations. I had no life skills. I met my, ex at that time. And I was just like, okay, here you go. You take care of everything. I was like, all right, sure. Our relationship was there. It started off where I was very clingy because of the dysfunction. We almost got a divorce really early on, went to therapy, got things in order, and then we never really connected. And I realized how independent I am. So I kind of started to be like, okay, if you're not willing to meet me, if you're not there, I'm just going to go entertain myself. So I
Mhm.
did. And so that's probably why we were together as long as we were, because he did his own thing. I did my own thing,
Mhm.
and we entertained ourselves, and so, but then it was hard finding where we connected in the middle. His experience with religion was his mom worked in the church and saw a falling out. So he didn't have as
Mm,
strict of a religious upbringing as what I did, but I always was kind of the person that was like, no, these are the things we need to do, this is the standard we need to follow. Yet at the same time, he very much fell into that old school programming of
mm,
the
mhm,
wife is this, she does that, the man is the head of the house, like that feeling of I couldn't make a decision, he had final word, that
mm.
sort of programming was very
So,
much.
what in your with your upbringing and your religious conditioning, just if people are curious because they didn't
Yeah.
maybe grow up in that
Mhm.
atmosphere, like what type of, what does a good girl look like in the religious setting? What expectations were put upon you?
Right, right. Oh my gosh. It's hard enough as it is, but like I said, also there was that added layer where I realized my mother was a narcissist with like borderline personality disorder. So there
So you
was
just mix these 2 things together and not a fun time.
not a fun time. So religion was used to the extreme. So it was fundamentalist Christianity.
Mm,
So basically everything was very literal. My mom was very much interested in like demon possession. So like it was the typical purity culture I was raised in. So, the whole idea of like the shame that's placed on your body, like hiding yourself and not feeling seen. Like the idea of like if a man sinned, you best self-reflect on what it was that could have possibly contributed to his sinning.
mhm.
So it was very much that narrative.
Always like the woman as the temptress, and it's your
Yes.
fault if you're not like, whenever I see that stuff, I always think, like, very childlike, like, you're just
Yeah.
childlike and perfect and poised. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so there was
Mm.
a lot of that as far as like feminine expression. And then what's interesting about it though is because based on the religious piece, I would think I would be softer growing up. But because of the dysfunction at home, I mean, when I was in third grade, my mom sat me at the table and told me she was suicidal and like expected me to talk her out of it. So it was just like that
Ooh.
role of having to be together. And so I think that, that because this whole journey, the biggest thing I could summarize with the idea of looking at my conditioning and my upbringing and religion and how that contributed to my expression and the things I'm going through as it relates to sexuality and my feminine expression. For me, I was pretty much embodying and pretty proud of like almost a toxic masculine expression,
Mm.
and I didn't realize it. I thought I was pretty balanced, but the thing is I spent 3 years before my divorce, like, doing self-work and stuff, but I wasn't participating. I
And
wasn't participating in life.
what would you define as toxic masculine expression
Oh.
as of late?
Yeah, oh gosh, there's so many things I can give you. So I've noticed I hyperfixate on my environment and everything being orderly and structured. Like there's no flow. Like there's, and it's like I need to control this. My life feels out of control, so I need to hyperfixate control. Feeling like it's safe to accept nurturing. That has been a huge one because no, I can't receive that because if I receive nurturing, there's something wrong with me. That's
Mm.
not healthy. Also I have to show up, be, and look together, which that one was the hardest for me because I am very expressive and vulnerable and open, but I realized that I felt safe to a certain degree, but it's like when certain foundational pieces were shaken, then the toxic expression of like I'm together like kicked in, that
Mm,
masculine was heightened. And so like emotions were weakness. I can't allow people to see me that way all of a sudden, and that's wrong. Playing, inner child, expression, softness, logic of being like, okay, so I went on this trip and I kept passing by this log. It was just like a log crossing like a little creek. And a part of me was like, I really want to walk across that log. Okay. I had so much inner turmoil and frustration because I was like, why do you want that? Is so freaking stupid. Like, what is the logic in that? Like, what
mhm,
are you gonna gain from that? Like, what are you trying to prove something? Like, what are you doing? Like what is crossing that log gonna do for you? And
mm,
it's like I
mhm,
passed it for days, and every time the inner child of me was like, I really want to go across that log. And then it would like, no, you can't express yourself that way. You can't be relaxed. You can't, like, there needs to be logic and reason. And so finally I ended up doing it and I stopped and I just took a deep breath and I just felt this wave of emotion. And I was like, I did this thing. And it didn't matter that there's absolutely no reason for me to or to not do it. I did it because some inner part of my child wanted to walk across the stupid log. And so why wouldn't I? Like,
mhm.
why is that a big deal? It shouldn't be a big deal. So a lot of really repressed expression, everything had to be orderly, which is very masculine.
Right. And even like when I first met you, you're a successful entrepreneur. Like you had your own business, you were booking, you were busy. And
Yes.
to have to decondition from all of that, like
Yeah.
wow, you've just like it's crazy how much you've done in such a short period of time. Like it probably doesn't feel short, when you're going through all that stuff, but like wow. And my other question was when you were talking about your awakening, like so you were going through life, you were doing what you needed to do, and all of a sudden you had this unexpected awakening. Like, what did that look like? And how did you process it? Were you still in your religious setting when that happened, or were you kind of moving away from it?
So that's a good question. So I was 41 with my first awakening, which was like overnight. Didn't entertain any of this stuff. At the time I had gotten to where I was kind of out of the church dynamic. But I very much lived in fear. So it was, and I didn't actually realize how much fear until after the awakening, because there were simple things like, um, it just like the whole idea of like the rapture coming and missing the rapture, like not being good enough, being possessed. Like I was sensitive to the things I watched. Like there was still a very much fear minded narrative that was kind of playing underneath. I was afraid to look at myself in the mirror in the eyes because like my mom always said that that was an opening to allow devils in, like demons in. So like I couldn't look at myself. So part of my healing journey, actually, I did like mirror work and
Mm,
like getting used to looking at my expression in my eyes and giving myself affirmations and love. So yeah, it was a hard journey because a lot of it was initially like deconstructing the religious narrative.
mm,
And I was so sheltered and naive. Like I didn't know anything about the 2000 years prior to Christianity of like the Vedas and Hinduism and Buddha.
mm,
Like I none of that I had any awareness or knowledge of. And so a lot of it was deconstructing a lot of that and realizing then how my behavior was influenced by how I was
Mm.
raised
And
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 working
what
through
sort of triggered that awareness? Like what triggered that awakening? What triggered the awareness? Was it just it came out of nowhere or what?
so it was an eclipse, like that first eclipse. I know, it's like it's crazy. Yeah, it was
And
the
when was
it,
that? When was that one?
it was the it's so it was a Gemini solar eclipse in June 2021. And it was in my, for anybody that knows astrology or curious of that, it was in my ninth house, which is
Mm.
around the topics of like philosophy and religion and beliefs. And Gemini is like open-minded and like
Wow, yeah.
curiosity. And so like it was in a very significant placement. And also my chart ruler as Venus is in Gemini as well. So Gemini has
Mm.
some weight in my chart for sure. So yeah,
Interesting. And then this second awakening, that this kind of sexual awakening you just had, that was from this recent eclipse in
yep,
April of
in Aries. Yep.
2024 in Aries. And remind me, I know our birthdays are like right beside each other. When's your birthday? Is it the 7th?
7th.
Mine's
Yes.
the 8th. So it
Yes,
happened
so yours was
on
on the eclipse.
on the eclipse.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the
And
yeah,
I've
same.
been just
Mhm,
spinning my tires ever since then. I don't know what's going on, but I'm trying
same.
to figure it out.
Yeah, it was a doozy. I'm glad to hear I'm not alone. Welcome to the
Yeah.
club.
No, I
Yeah.
actually got like ill, like on my birthday, on the eclipse. I
Yeah.
started getting sick. And it was like the mother of all illness. I hadn't been that sick since I was a kid. I had like the flu, I had the cold. It was all everything. And it felt like
Energetic
a
clearing
purge.
and
Yeah. But
yep.
ever since then, I've still been like, things are different. Things aren't flowing. Things aren't moving how I'm used to. And I'm trying to figure out like, well, what is happening? What is flowing?
Yeah.
But yeah, my sun in
Everything in my life has been rebirth. Like everything. It's like at this point I'm like, yeah, there's no need for you to tell me because I know it's going to be either a dragonfly, a butterfly, rebirth,
Oh, yeah.
something.
Not to
Yes.
mention the snake shedding its skin on your porch. Like,
Right? Exactly.
wow. Oh
What's
my goodness.
crazy is like I love astrology, and the one of the things recently I've enjoyed is like studying the asteroids. And so
Mm.
like in my chart, like major goddesses like I have like on freaking point, which is really kind of not that common for, so like Kali is on my IC, which is the underworld of your chart, and Hathor is on my chart ruler. I've got them all. I like basket and you there's, yeah, I don't remember, but there's a
Oh my
lot. And
God. Remind me to hit
so
you up about this after. Like, where are my goddesses? Show me.
yeah, heck yeah.
Oh, that's so exciting. So and then you went through your awakening. You've been deconstructing the fear ever since. And then very recently, you've gone through this kind of like like sexual awakening. So
Yes.
what has that been like? Because obviously, it's happened in little teaspoons to get you to this point.
Yes.
But tell us a little bit about that, like reclaiming the divine feminine energy, which is kind of the polar opposite of what you were doing. Like, yeah, tell us about that part. Like, what has that been like?
Ah, yeah. So, all right, where to start? So part of that whole experience that came through was identifying a lot of challenges I had around repressed sexuality and the sense of things that I felt were me that I was denying or feeling shame, or and just to be in complete transparency, I am identifying as pansexual. So obviously, in a religious narrative, that is not that accepted, so I didn't know the labeling for what I was feeling, but I knew I was really trying to repress it. At the time I thought it was best identified as bisexuality, which is more gender specific, where pansexuality is like, yeah, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
It's fluid. So with this, there was multiple occasions in which the universe in my healing journey was kind of like, hey, let's talk about this area. And I'm like, I'm just shutting off all aspects of sexuality because it's like there's this piece that I feel like I don't know what to do with, I don't understand, and I feel shame around. So I'm just going to shut it all down. And I tried to live that way. And it's been interesting seeing the transition when we repress that sexual energy. What we're repressing is life force, like life force
Mm.
energy.
Wow,
So
yeah.
it's not even just about the sexuality. It's like I was sleeping all the time. I felt tired. I felt like I kept pushing towards my career and agitation, like that's sexual tension.
Mm.
There was all these expressions that were showing oh my gosh, the cramping on my cycle and the imbalance there. I mean, physically, emotionally, mentally, there was all of these things that I was just like shrugging off, shrugging off. The second I came to terms with this, I wake up wide awake, excited to start my day, 6, 7 a.m. every day. That's unheard of. Like I was lucky to roll out of bed at 10 a.m. If there was no enthusiasm to I've had energy and all drive and creativity and expression and emotion, and all of these things are part of sexual energy. So yes,
Mm.
it is the sexuality, but I feel like the key is for anybody is accepting that we all are designed uniquely. And so I personally found comfort in reading my astrology chart because I look at my chart and I'm like, "Oh, okay. Yeah. That says that and that says that and that says that." So it's like, okay, so if I can accept this chart in every other area of my life and see it play out and be true, why am I attaching shame towards this topic? Obviously there's a reason that I have this particular energy and expression, and it's okay. So
Mhm.
that was a big part of being like, okay, yes, because I think ultimately when it comes to sexuality and expression in the divine feminine, you could name whatever it is, and there's a higher octave of it that I feel like is an expression that we have to kind of like accept this layer first before we can get there. That's when we talk about tantra and things like that, it's like if you can't embrace the masculine and feminine within yourself and a partner, and if you can't do this groundwork, and if you're too self-concerned about your body and your appearance, am I moving right, am I doing this, you're not
Mhm.
achieving that unity connection, you're not weaving together with that person. So I think that accepting our sexuality is the first key, and talking about those things to raising the octave. And
Mhm.
so that's kind of where I've been at. Like with
Wow.
that has required me to accept more of a feminine expression. And it's not been easy because it's the sensual side, it's the emotional side, it's the flow, and softness. And
And the
I've,
feminine is honestly like wild. Like when I say wild, I
yes,
mean like wilderness, like really like
yes,
under the moon and
doesn't
moving fluid
care.
and
Yeah.
chaotic and like cyclically, like always
I
running
love
through
how
phases.
you touch
Yeah.
yes, exactly. Like you're embodying that energy and I'm witnessing it. Yeah, exactly.
And
Yeah.
I've honestly, everything you're saying, like to a degree, is like so similar because, I used to be, wasn't raised in a religious upbringing, but work, go, grind, do,
Yes.
survive, your emotions don't matter, and like very
Right.
much in the masculine side. And um, I have a program that I run once a year, and it's called Walk on the Wild Side. And I actually was going through a massive it was an awakening, but it felt like a breakdown at the time. And I remember like just I can't see it. I don't know what the issue is. Somebody show me. And then I kind of got this like this goddess kind of energy came through, and they were like mirrors. They were like, this is the issue. You're not embracing these
Yeah.
things. You're not embracing sensuality. You're not embracing flow. You're not embracing trust or your cycles. Like you're
Yeah.
trying to act at 110% 7 days a week.
Yes.
Not what women are designed to do. We operate
Right.
in the lunar cycle. So our energies, and this is something that sounds like a no-brainer, but like people really got to listen to this. The women's energy moves with the moon, which is in phases and cyclically, and over this 28-day span of time, where men's like masculine, I was saying masculine, men, let's say feminine and masculine energy
Yeah.
runs with the sun, a
Yeah.
24-hour predictable cycle.
Yeah. Mm,
And I
mm,
remember just being like, what am I doing? And it still takes a
yeah.
lot to deconstruct that as well. But
Yeah.
yeah, the more I learn about the feminine energy, the more I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
our society has done such a disservice to what
Yeah.
that really looks like. And it is a
Yeah.
journey that there's not really a guide for. You
Right.
really got to figure it out on your own. Like,
Yeah. And you know what's funny is I was so clueless. I love how you mentioned that that energy came on and it felt like a mirror for you. So part of this realization has actually come through someone like crossing paths with my life that has been a reflection through the awareness. And let me tell you, once again, going back to that, masculine expression I was used to, you want to guess if I liked that? Mm-mm. I'm like, I'm like, oh man, dang. Like I'm seeing this imbalance, but I'm also mad because I didn't figure it out first. But it was like I didn't have access to it. So that was another layer is because I'll be honest, like my one of my biggest challenges is relationships. I don't open I once again, going back to the same concept, I don't open up easily to others. I can open up about my story, but actually letting energy into my life, I have challenges with. And so that idea of realizing that, okay, also, I can't just, life is meant to be here to experienced with others, not like, I was pretty convinced I was just gonna like move out on my own and just be like this badass independent, like don't need anybody, don't need anything, but what is that? That's a closed heart and insecurity, really masked
mhm.
over by that independence. And so, yeah, it wasn't fun, like having like connections and then realizing, oh, wow, I've got a lot of work to do, and I thought I had done all the work. And so, yeah, it's ever evolving, which I'm constantly reminded by this individual that it's a spiral. It's a spiral. So,
Yes, it is a spiral. I know you're always like, am I going to get to the finish line? But you're like, no, never. You're going to
yeah.
consistently peel back more layers, which is
Yeah.
crazy. And then, like, as you speak about, this layer of awakening that you've went through recently, it's so easy to be like, well, I'm in a marriage and things are functioning like to a degree that I've accepted, so I don't have to learn to grow anymore. This is how it is, but we're always in spiral. We're always in this state of like evolution, and it's like it's pretty amazing that you're able to be like, no, I still want to grow. I want to have these connections.
Yeah.
How did you like how like I'm just curious, you don't have to share, but how did
Oh,
like
I'm
the
open.
the drop come in that you were like, this relationship actually isn't gonna evolve with me?
Yeah. It was very hard. It was very hard. And it's interesting because I can remember, like, because after my awakening, because when you go through, my first awakening, when you go through something like that, your energy shifts. And I'm a firm believer, like what you kind of were speaking to just there, that when we shift our energy, therefore the energetic agreement of those around us is renegotiated. So a lot of times that's why when people go through awakenings, they lose a lot of friends. and connections. I lost all of them except for my marriage. And even that, we hit rock bottom and had to work on trying to fumble our way through to what new foundation was going to be there. And I can remember when it was, some of the hardest days, like I sat down with a journal and I said, okay, universe, I'm not going to say what I want this person to be. I'm just going to say, this is what I feel like would be supportive in my life. And I just journaled like things that I would appreciate in an expression. And that was 2 years before I had this realization. And I thought, like I said, we were rowing in the same direction. But once the conversation took place, a lot under the surface came forward that I was suspicious of, such as him admitting he purposely kept his distance from me. My energy is a lot. I activate people. He did not want to be activated. He wanted, to your point, like stagnant, set. This is what life is. And my energy was constantly shaking it. And it was uncomfortable. Therefore, there was distance. Therefore, there was lack of intimacy. There was lack of emotional connection. All of these things take place, but that doesn't mean that either of us, in whatever expression that is, aren't worthy of having or experiencing those things. And
Exactly.
experiencing them has been for both my and his betterment. But it's hard because I think socially, when you look at a marriage, that was like we were together 25 years total, married 21. That's a long time. But it was a smooth transition as far as everything has played out to where and he has felt very supported that this was the right move in the process. But it was hard. Like it's hard to go from what life was and feeling like, okay, I can just ignore like all these aspects of myself, but this is familiar, to say, okay, all right, universe, you've taken me this far. All right, where are we going? And then just like, no clue, no clue where I'm going. Still working on that one now.
Oh
But
my
I thought
goodness.
I knew. Yep, day by day, learning flow, which is what? Feminine.
Of course. Of course. Yeah. I feel like I'm on that journey with you with the learning how to flow and trust. And I've gotten better. I've gotten better. So, um, speaking of kind of like energetic agreements between people, and I really love how you worded that. That was really enlightening. But something that I always notice when I'm like looking at an Akashic record and I'm looking at soul connections, most of the relationships that we do have are based on love, even if they don't always express outwardly. But there's always
Yeah,
this like agreement between the two souls where it's like they want you want each other to grow. And
yeah,
sometimes as humans, like we don't grow until we're incredibly uncomfortable. So there's like this
yeah,
person who just pushes and pushes
yeah,
until
yeah,
finally it's like, I'm not okay with this. I do
yeah,
want emotional intimacy. I do want physical intimacy. I want to be
yeah,
understood. I want to be celebrated and accepted. And I do find there's often like that the negotiation part where it's like, okay, I've pushed you to the point now where
yeah.
you are asking those questions. And it's like, okay, are we going to grow together? Or
Hmm.
was that
Yeah,
the line in the sand and that's the work is done and now you can go on into your other
yeah,
world. And I do find it's like a toss up. Sometimes I
yeah.
see people grow together and sometimes I don't, but
I got to tell you this. Okay. I'm grinning ear to ear. Okay. I got to tell you this. Okay.
I'm excited.
You read our record connection.
Did
His
I?
and you did. You did. And you said, Dale said that this time around, it's it's for you, whatever you want. And he's here to support whatever that looks like. And I feel like the process was me, because it was me having that awakening, coming to that realization, and then being like, okay, I have a choice. Do I stay stagnant? Do I stay here? Or do I explore this other side? And so it was really interesting because whenever I'm trying to remember all the details, but I can remember when I told him about our connection, he didn't love it. Like, because it was like, he's like, what about me? Sort of thing. But you and I both know that we're not the sum of this life. We're the
Oh
sum
yeah.
of all sorts of life. So I'm sure if we were to look at, our soul connections of what, each of us contributed back and forth, at
Mhm.
some point when he was making that arrangement, he was like, yeah, I'm good now. You do
Yeah.
you, and I'll be there with you to help and support. And he did. He was exactly like, we both have no regrets. And he was exactly what I needed in my life to get me to where I am now. And we have a beautiful child. And, this is, and I even hesitate to saying out loud because I know it sounds so unusual, but the whole process with our teenage child, this has been smooth to the point where we've almost been like, are you sure? Like, we've done everything to try to catch for the other shoe to drop, but it actually has helped him grow and expand and like open his mind to new experiences and things, because he's on the spectrum and very much stagnant, safe.
Mhm.
This is where it is. So this experience has also brought out moments of like joy and expression and smiles. Like, we've done things together, and I videoed without him knowing, because if he knew, he'd be mad. And he's just glowing, smiling, and happy, and living and present. And I've sent it to my ex, and he's like, oh my gosh, how is that our child right now? So it's, all of us have grown from it, which
Wow.
really makes you stop and think about what society says life is supposed to look like when it comes to these long-term monogamous, structured relationships. And is that evolution and growth, or
Mhm.
is that safety and stagnance? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I
It
often like,
depends.
yeah. Oh, there's so many good points in there. But I often do find like this is just a general statement, and the feminine has their negative expressions too. But I do find when we have to just remember that the masculine energy is what has ruled this world for quite some time now. So I do find that when the masculine energy is in its negative expression or its low octave, it really wants to control and own. It
Mhm.
needs to own and
Yes.
control.
Mhm.
So it's like monogamy is kind of just like a form of control and ownership, really.
Absolutely. I
Interesting. And it's honestly like hearing this, it makes me really think, with these long-term, this is how it is, that's how it's always been. What narratives are we all telling ourselves
Mhm.
about who we need to be to maintain this relationship? Like, why are we not being honest? You said earlier about the good wife or the good girl.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have my own version of that, and it's like nobody actually said that. Like my partner now, like, he sees right through it. He's like, "Stop doing these things.
Yeah.
Nobody cares." I don't. And then I'm like, like, why am
Mhm.
I policing myself? Like, when I
Yes.
first started dating him, like, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, um, I remember, like, I would make supper and I would make a meal that I thought he was gonna enjoy, even though I knew I wasn't gonna enjoy it because I don't like meat and I don't like potatoes, and that's what I would make, and it's like, "Why are
You
you
don't
doing
like
this?"
potatoes.
Okay, I do like potatoes, but they make me feel terrible.
Yeah.
Like, they're so heavy.
Okay.
They make me feel terrible.
We were gonna have to end the podcast here. I was like, you don't like potatoes? No,
Yeah,
no.
no, I actually love potatoes. I love all the things that make me feel awful, like
Yeah.
potato soup.
Dairy's mine. Yeah.
Oh, the worst, yeah. So I would make these things, and it's like, where does this narrative come from? That
Yeah.
we're just living in these roles, like,
Mhm.
quote unquote, that we've decided what they're supposed to look like, and they're not aligned to the human spirit within.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And we all do it.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that this is, going back to kind of, so this is my hope for the future. This is my like fairy dream, okay? So, yeah, a couple things. You talking about the relationship piece to that and the masculine and the ownership. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that because part of what I'm realizing, I didn't even know like part of the whole belief system of tantra is non-dualistic. I've been kind of speaking that language, didn't realize that connected.
And what
And
does
just
that mean? Non-dualistic.
so my perspective is this is that I don't think there's any right or wrong. I feel like everything in life happens. There's no like if you we all like to play parts and our parts we choose those parts because we're what consciousness evolving and learning itself. So it's like you might play the villain, you might play the good guy, you might, there are different roles and we are all of them. And we're here to live these experiences to evolve our conscious awareness. And there's no right or wrong. There's the moment and where we go. And so I tend to have a very open perspective with that. I believe everything in life happens and there's no judgment for that. Because of that, I also feel like you said, we're meant to flow and we're not meant to hold on to, like you said, the ownership of, I need to do whatever in my power to make this work or not work. Are you working against nature in that sense? What if the next relationship is the next piece of the puzzle to help you evolve and grow? So I think the idea, while I'm not, once again, I don't like the complete black and white boxes. So are there people that maybe incarnated to be the fullest embodiment of a, beautiful relationship that stays together forever and dies at the same time in bed? Yes, I'm sure there are those expressions, but I think should we say this is, apply judgment towards different lifestyles?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely not. And I think that having a point where we understand that that's big. And two, to your point of the dinner, and you talked about like making things and, with the things, I would love to see relationships get to the point where we feel so whole within and healed that we stop doing those things so naturally. And also, we have such a loving trust in others who have done the same, knowing that they're going to communicate their needs. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So it's like this feel of like, I don't need to try to spend energy on, you know, figuring this out. And they speak freely. But it's
Exactly.
like, it's so simple, but there's so many layers to that. Nobody does, not many people do that.
No.
You know,
And
and there is empathy, and I do get that. There is being intuitive. There's a difference between intuitively like connecting and knowing versus the more anxious sort of
yeah,
undertone, of trying
exactly.
to soothe and care and
And
do
like when
for.
I would do that, it was honestly coming from a place of I'm not lovable as I am, so I have to show the people around me what my value is. That's where it came from me.
Yeah.
And so when you say that like unconditional acceptance, like that's huge. And I just wanted the few things you've said have triggered this like memory of a dream I had recently. So I struck like my issue is like, yeah, definitely not feeling like valuable as an individual. Like I do have to constantly prove that I'm worthy and like I matter. So there's like this worth and this lack of like feeling lovable. So, I'm really working on this worth. Like, why do I have to constantly work and push? Like, can't I just be inherently worthy? So I had this sort of dream. I don't know. You know how dreams, you're like, I don't know what they are, but they're a dream. And I think I finally like met God or met what the creator is or met what this energy
Yeah.
is. And when I was standing in the presence of it, it was just it was just alive. Like it was alive and not doing anything. There was no purpose, there was
I
no
love it.
agenda. It was just existing. And it like spoke to me and it was like, isn't it just wonderful to be alive? And I remember being like,
You are
wow,
speaking my language.
that's it, huh? And I realized in that moment, we always talk about love, 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 love. Oh, love. What is love? When I met God or when I met the creator, love is unconditional acceptance. On your worst day, on your best day, in your
Yeah.
worth, in your lack of worth, it doesn't matter. None of it matters. Existence is what matters.
Yeah.
And like, it just, in that moment, I realized nothing matters. Just accept it, accept yourself, accept life. And I was like, that's love. I didn't know. I
Wow.
thought they were different things.
Yeah, that's powerful. And I feel the depths of what you're saying because like I've come to a point for myself where I mean, and let's be honest, you and I both were Aries. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So it's like we are ambitious and we are like all of these things. And I came to a point in my, in my journey recently where I literally sat and felt like, wow, I know there are things I know about myself that are identifiers, but at the same time, and it's like even the expression is blank because that's how it feels. It's
Yeah.
this essence of, but, but what if it's, and, and I go back and forth, because it's like, yes, I want to help people and I want to make a difference and I want to, all of these things. But then at the same time, it's like, what if it's all about just simply being and following your heart and being in tuned with your heart? And and I had someone ask me because they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "I want to impact a lot of people. Like I want to get on stage." And I had this moment realization because I also enjoy acting and I'm taking singing lessons. And it was a simple example. I know all the expression. I'm working on all the
I
expressions.
love it.
I'm like, dang it, I'm gonna master this, which is very masculine. But baby steps.
Yes.
But it was like this feeling of it's like, okay, and this was hard for me. It's like, okay, do I my north node is Leo, which is, expression and being seen and all those things. And I'm like, okay, do I want to be on stage speaking because I feel I need to reach these people? Or are there other expressions in which I want to be on stage simply because it excites my heart and I'm doing that? And by me embodying it and just being and doing the things that I'm drawn to, it naturally does that work for me. Does that make
Exactly.
sense?
Yeah.
So it was like, and I'm still chewing on that because my answer to the person I was talking to was like, I don't know if that's enough. Like, is that enough? I'm so ambitious. Like, what if I surrender to that? Is that enough? Which is a lot to sit with. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because why wouldn't it be enough? You
Exactly.
know, it's just leads to deeper contemplation.
Oh God, yeah. And there's that like if you're a North Node Leo, there's that like Aquarian,
In 11th
I have to
house.
serve. I have to serve. Like I guess they're
Yep.
not really servants. They're kind of rebels who are like
Yeah.
end up
Yep.
accidentally being the leaders. But
Yep.
there's like this feeling with Aquarius with when I sit in it that's like we have to work for humanity, humanity, humanity,
Yes.
humanity. We have to evolve, we have to grow. And Leo is like
Heart
I'm doing
centered.
it just because I want
Yeah.
to. I feel like the light within. And I always get this visual with Aquarius that it's like, and I don't know why I know this. I don't never learned it, but the bottom half of the chart is like that individual expression, and the
Yes.
top half is that out expression. But I am actually a North Node Aquarius, so that's funny.
We're opposite.
Yeah,
What house is yours in?
one.
Oh,
Yeah,
ooh, girl.
confusing, right? Yeah.
That's powerful. All
Yeah.
right.
So I always get this visual with the Aquarius energy that it's like you can't hold the lantern for the collective if there's no light inside of you. So it's like you're doing the opposite. It's like you've been
Yeah.
holding that lantern up for so long, but it's like, okay,
Yeah.
where's that light within? Just for you, just for you. And for me,
Yeah.
it's like, okay, hold the lantern up for somebody else. But yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, and it's hard because like I was so comfortable with all of the other, that it has been a lot of this journey has been like participating just for the sheer sake of flow and presence and
Mm,
doing it, which is very feminine, you know.
man, that's a long journey. Like you've walked a long journey. Like I'm not time-wise, but like to
Yeah.
go from that polarity of the spectrum to over here, like you've covered a lot of ground. And if you had to summarize, like, and this might be something you can't even answer, but if you had to summarize like what the purpose of this journey is, like, is it to reclaim that vitality? Is it to rebalance? Like what have you been searching for? Why are you walking this journey, do you think?
I love that. I'm an Aries. I like challenge. Like, right? We like
Yes,
the challenge. That's
you
hard
do like a
though.
challenge.
Yeah, we do like a challenge. So I'm feeling into that. What I'm intuitively feeling is a combination of both balance and also acceptance of the feminine expression.
Mm,
Because there are various things, and I know you and I, before we hit record, we're talking like when you read for me which was the very first spiritual reading ever I got. He said, "There's this dark goddess, and she's like in this like sexy red dress, and she's so, oh my God." You were like so excited. You're like, she's so beautiful, and like she's holding your inner child, and she's just sensual and playful. And she says, you don't like her. She is like wanting to work with you, and you won't work with her. And when I'm also a galactic astrologer, which I was also spoon fed, which also connected to your reading with me. And part of that, with that experience, is realizing certain significant placements, in my chart, as it relates to different potent goddess type energies
mm,
with that. And I found out also that Rumi was like a significant guide of mine. And I was actually disappointed. I was like, what? What am I supposed to do with Rumi?
oh my
Like, is
God, he's
he
so
even,
great.
I'm going to be honest. I was even like, is he even like an ascended master or anything? I was like so judgy. I was like, really? Can't you give me like Metatron or, give me something, Rumi? What am
That
I,
is so funny.
And I go back and I look, and I know that I'm here to bring in my life balance and to be an embodiment of unconditional love to its fullest extent. And
Mm,
I know that why I'm going through what I'm doing right now is uncomfortably stretching and opening my heart deeper and deeper, to the point where the other day I was just feeling such this immense love for everything that it was painful. And I was like, I've painted, I've sang, I've danced, I've done all of these things, I've explored my sexuality, and I just feel like I can barely hold it in my vessel. And
mm,
I felt called to meditate, and I started meditating and, working with the energy. And I don't know what that's going to look like per se, but I feel like it's going to be way more simplistic and beautiful than probably what I could have ever imagined.
wow, I agree. And I mean, if you're moving into a space of like unconditional love, which I believe is unconditional acceptance of self, but then all other people too. And then like who to be a better guide for that than someone who's walked the journey that you're walking, right? The 180 in the different direction. So sometimes I think we go through, again, is it just beingness, or is there sort of a purpose woven in? Where does it start? What, like, where does it cross? Where does it start? But sometimes I always notice that, like, we don't want to hear from people whose life has always been like perfect, because their level of growth or their level of experience is so small, and then when it's kind of like, I want to hear from you, because that's a massive journey. Like, that's something that we can all take something from. So sometimes I wonder if we walk these journeys to be the guides, or
Yeah.
to kind of awaken or activate other people, even just by being around them and them seeing what we're
Right.
choosing in life, right?
By being. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if you had one piece of advice for somebody who's working on loving themselves or accepting themselves,
Yeah.
what would you leave as a piece of advice for them?
I would say give yourself grace and acceptance and love right where you are because that's hard. We often, like we talked about, it's like healing more, moving more, doing more, fixing. I think that one of the biggest things that I'm learning with this feminine expression is I would feel and I would need to understand and adjust it because I wanted to understand myself better. Some I'm learning at some points, of course, we don't want to stay there forever, but I think there's a level of acceptance of exactly where you are in that moment and being like, I feel you, sadness. I love you right where you're at, and accepting what you're feeling in that moment because I feel like what I'm learning is if we do that, it passes quicker
Mm.
versus when we sit and, well, why, and yes, there are things we need to figure out why, but I think just sometimes people have a hard time with just the first step of just like being like, okay, this is where I am. I mean, what do you're there. So just be like, okay, this is where I am. That can be enough. Like,
Mhm.
and then I think that as we, stop resisting, which I've realized with my experience, the more I was mirrored, like I talked about, through another person, what needed work, I wanted to embody that masculine expression of having everything together. The more I did that, the more the emotions intensified, the more I was a complete disaster and mess, the more I was uncomfortable trying to fix it. It was just a spiral where it's like, if I would have just been like, it's okay to have emotions, it's okay to be wild, it's okay to be messy, it's okay to be these things,
Mm.
and to just allow that moment, that it probably will have more clarity and more ease of flow and understanding versus if we try to resist it or fight it or push against it.
Ah, I love that. That's huge. That's something I'm actually learning, like, right now. So perfect timing to hear that reiterated to me.
I feel
Okay.
ya.
So if people want more from you, Cassandra, how can they find you?
Yeah, so I haven't done as much lately on my podcast just because I'm allowing that flow and presence, but there's a lot of good
Yes.
content there and I will be adding more. But my podcast is things I talk about. I would say you could, check that out. My website is my name, Cassandra DeAnn. But I would say for your listeners, especially with this, if they're listening and interested, so something I've been doing is sexual astrology. And because
Mm.
that was very healing for me in this journey, like I said, realizing if I can accept this chart for life purpose and this and that, and North Node, like, why can't I see my sexual expression, my love, romance, like what I'm looking for in a connection. Like, why can't I accept that? So I've been
Mm.
doing that. So it's I can provide the link for
Yeah, send me
you.
the link and we'll put
Yeah.
everything in the notes so
Mhm.
people can just go right
Yeah.
directly to you. That's so cool. I'm definitely as soon as we hit
Yeah.
stop recording, I'm like, give me some of that. Oh, well,
Yeah,
thank
it's
you so
fun.
much. It was an honor to have you as
Oh,
always.
I love it. I know. I love you so much.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you. Right back at you.